All right, so we are diving deep into Islamic history today. And wow, you really went all out with the source material.
Yeah, well, it's such a vast and rich topic. I figured we needed a good foundation to build on.
Definitely. I mean, I'm looking at articles, timelines, maps, even a few excerpts from some pretty dense academic books.
That's the beauty of Islamic history. It spans centuries, continents, so many different perspectives.
Absolutely. And it's clear from the questions you sent in that you're not just interested in the basic timelines.
Right. The dynasties are important, but we need to understand the cultural and intellectual movements, too.
Exactly. So buckle up, everyone, because this is going to be a wild ride.
A whirlwind tour of Islamic history.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning with Muhammad, a trader from the Quraysh tribe, who starts preaching Islam around 610 CE.
That's really the starting point, the moment everything changes.
And at the heart of his message is this really powerful idea.
Monotheism, the belief in one God, Allah, and this becomes the bedrock of the entire Islamic faith.
Got it. One God, Allah. That's the core principle. But then things get a little tricky. Muhammad and his followers have to migrate from Mecca to Medina in 622 CE.
Right. That migration is known as the Hijra, and it's a turning point for several reasons.
It's a big deal. I mean, it marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar.
Exactly, to talk about a fresh start, but it also symbolizes the resilience of this new Muslim community.
They're facing persecution, they're forced to leave their home, but they don't give up on their beliefs.
It's a testament to their commitment to this new faith.
Okay, so the Hijra, a major turning point, the start of the Islamic calendar. And speaking of foundations, this is where the Quran comes into play.
Absolutely. The Quran revealed to Muhammad is the holy book of Islam.
It's like the ultimate guide for Muslims, right?
Think of it as a combination of spiritual guidance, moral teachings, and a framework for understanding the world.
It's like the ultimate instruction manual, but probably way more poetic.
Definitely much more poetic.
So we've got Muhammad, the Hijra, the Quran. What happens next in this unfolding story?
Well, after Muhammad's death, the Muslim community faces this huge challenge of leadership.
Right. Who takes over? How do they move forward?
And that's how the caliphate emerges, this system of governance led by caliphs who are seen as successors to Muhammad.
The caliphs got it, but I'm guessing things weren't always smooth sailing in the caliphate.
Oh, definitely. There were periods of conflict and tension. That's just the nature of power sometimes.
And one of the big shakeups was the assassination of Ali, the fourth caliph.
A pivotal moment, it leads to a power struggle and eventually the rise of the Umayyad dynasty under Muawiyah.
The Umayyads interesting, and our sources mention that they set up their capital in Damascus.
A strategic move, it gave them a central location to govern their expanding empire.
And this empire is huge, right? I mean, it stretches across North Africa, the Middle East, even into parts of Europe.
It was a vast and powerful empire. They controlled a lot of territory.
Wow, talk about ambition, but it wasn't just about expanding borders, was it? The Umayyads also oversaw a period of cultural and intellectual flourishing?
Absolutely. Islamic art and architecture really blossomed under their rule. You see the construction of magnificent mosques like the Great Mosque of Damascus.
A testament to their architectural skills. Those structures still stand today. It's incredible.
They were master builders, for sure.
Okay, so they're expanding their empire. They're building these incredible structures. But I'm also noticing that around this time, a split emerges within Islam, the Shia and the Sunni.
Ah, yes, a division that has had lasting impact on the Muslim world.
So what caused this split? What were the main differences between these two groups?
It really comes down to who should rightfully succeed Muhammad as the leader of the Muslim community.
Okay, so a question of leadership succession.
Exactly. The Shia believed that leadership should have passed directly to Ali Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law and his descendants.
Okay, so they believe in a direct line of succession from Muhammad through Ali.
Right. But the Sunni, on the other hand, accept the legitimacy of the first four caliphs, which includes the Umayyads.
So a difference of opinion about the proper line of succession leads to this major split within Islam.
And that split, unfortunately, continues to have implications for the Muslim world even today.
So we've got political maneuvering, religious divides, but in the midst of all this, how were these vast Islamic empires actually run?
Well, they had to develop efficient systems of governance and economics to manage their vast territories.
Makes sense. Our sources mention some intriguing terms like the jizya and the kharaj.
Ah, yes. Those were key elements of the Islamic economic system.
So break it down for us. What were these taxes all about?
Well, the jizya was a tax levied on non-Muslims living within the Islamic Empire.
So it was kind of like a protection tax in a way.
You could see it that way. It provided them with protection and exempted them from military service.
Okay, so they pay the tax they get to practice their own religion, and they're protected by the state.
Precisely, a system of coexistence in a way.
So it wasn't just about generating revenue, it was also about maintaining social order and even a form of religious tolerance.
Exactly. And then you have the Kharaj, which was a land tax paid primarily by Muslims.
Okay, so two different types of taxes with different purposes.
Right. The Kharaj helped fund the administration of the empire and supported things like public works projects.
So the jizya and the kharaj keep the wheels turning. But these empires weren't just focused on internal affairs. They were constantly pushing boundaries, engaging with other powers.
Oh, absolutely. They were expanding, interacting with other civilizations, sometimes clashing.
One event that really captures this clash of civilizations is the Battle of Tours in 732 CE.
A pivotal moment, the Umayyad Caliphate, pushing into what is now France, is defeated by the Frankish army led by Charles Martel.
Wow, that's a battle straight out of a history book. What were the ramifications of this clash? Did it stop the spread of Islam into Europe?
It definitely marked a turning point. While Islamic rule continued in the Iberian Peninsula for centuries, the Battle of Tours effectively halted their advance further into Europe.
So a major turning point in the history of both Europe and the Islamic world.
Some historians even argue that it helped shape the religious and political landscape of Western Europe.
The ripple effects are still felt today, pretty mind-blowing. But as we know, the story of Islamic history doesn't end there.
Oh no, not at all. A new dynasty is about to emerge, one that will leave a lasting mark on the world.
Intriguing. Tell us more.
Well, in 750 CE, the Abbasids overthrow the Umayyads and establish their own caliphate with a dazzling new capital, Baghdad.
Baghdad, legendary even today. A city of stories and wonder.
Exactly. And this shift in power from the Umayyads to the Abbasids really changes the trajectory of the Islamic Empire.
So what did the Abbasids bring to the table? How did they reshape the Islamic world?
They ushered in what's often considered the Golden Age of Islam.
The Golden Age, fascinating. Tell me more.
It was a period of extraordinary intellectual, scientific, and cultural flourishing under the Abbasids. Baghdad became this vibrant, multicultural hub, attracting scholars, artists, and thinkers from all over.
So they were all about fostering knowledge and creativity.
Exactly. They also abolished the preferential treatment that Arabs had enjoyed under the Umayyads.
So a more inclusive society based on Islamic law?
Precisely, they were trying to create a society where everyone had the opportunity to contribute.
That's a pretty progressive vision for the time.
They were definitely ahead of the curve in many ways.
But I imagine even golden ages have their shadows, right?
That's true. No empire is perfect, and the Abbasids face their own challenges and setbacks.
Well, before we get into those, can you tell me about this legendary Caliph Harun al-Rashid? He keeps popping up in our sources.
Ah, yes. Harun al-Rashid V, Abbasid Caliph, he ruled during the peak of the Golden Age.
I'm picturing opulent palaces, lavish feasts, and brilliant minds engaging in lively debates.
He's often portrayed as this wise and just ruler, a patron of the arts and sciences. His court was a center of learning and cultural exchange.
His reign sounds like something out of 1001 Nights, full of intrigue and adventure.
There are tons of stories about him. He's become a legendary figure in both history and literature.
So we've got the Umayyads, the Abbasids, these powerful dynasties shaping the course of Islamic history. But our sources indicate that the Islamic world was far from monolithic.
Absolutely. You're right. It wasn't just one big empire. There were other Islamic dynasties emerging in different parts of the world.
It's like a multiplayer game of civilization with different empires vying for power and influence.
Each with its own unique story to tell its own contributions to make.
So where should we go next on our whirlwind tour of Islamic dynasties? What other corners of the Islamic world should we explore?
Well, let's head westward to the Iberian Peninsula. Remember, even though the Umayyads were defeated at Tours, they still had a strong presence in Al-Andalus, what they called Islamic Spain.
Oh, right, Al-Andalus. That's where we find the Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba. I've always been fascinated by that period.
It's a fascinating period indeed. The Umayyad Caliphate of Cordoba, established in 756 CE, was a center of learning, culture, and architectural splendor.
Cities like Cordoba and Toledo flourishing under Islamic rule with magnificent mosques, libraries, and palaces.
They rivaled anything in the East. It was a truly remarkable period.
And wasn't there something about a famous library in Cordoba?
Ah, yes. The library at the Great Mosque of Cordoba, it housed thousands of manuscripts at its peak, one of the largest libraries in the world at the time.
So while Europe was in the so-called Dark Ages, Al-Andalus was a beacon of knowledge and enlightenment. What a contrast.
It was a time of great intellectual ferment and cultural exchange.
Okay, so we've got Islamic Spain, but where else are we seeing these powerful dynasties popping up?
Let's jump over to North Africa, where a new power is on the rise, the Fatimid Caliphate.
The Fatimids, tell me more.
The Fatimids were a Shia dynasty that emerged in Tunisia in the early 10th century.
And they claimed descent from Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, right?
Exactly, hence their name. They expanded their power quite rapidly, conquering Egypt and establishing a new capital, Cairo, in 969 CE.
Cool. And so Cairo, one of the most iconic cities in the world, was founded by the Fatimids. That's incredible.
It is. The Fatimids were major patrons of the arts and sciences, and Cairo became a bustling center of trade and scholarship under their rule. They even built the famous Al-Azhar Mosque,
Which would later become a renowned center of Islamic learning. It seems like every dynasty we encounter leaves behind these incredible architectural masterpieces.
Architecture was a way for them to express their power, their piety, and their artistic sensibilities.
Okay, so we've got Al-Andalus, the Fatimids in North Africa. Where else are we seeing Islamic empires making their mark?
Let's venture eastward to Central Asia. This is where we encounter the Karakhanids, the first Turkic Islamic dynasty.
The Karakhanids, that's a new one for me.
Okay.
What can you tell us about them?
They played a crucial role in spreading Islam throughout Central Asia. They controlled a vast territory encompassing parts of modern-day Khuzestan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan.
So we're talking about a major expansion of the Islamic world further into Asia. That's fascinating.
They were a significant force in the region, and they left behind some impressive architectural landmarks.
Like what?
Well, one of their most notable achievements is the construction of the Samanid Mausoleum in Bukhara, Uzbekistan, a stunning example of early Islamic architecture.
Okay, I'm definitely adding that to my travel bucket list. So the Islamic world is expanding, new dynasties are emerging, but the Abbasids are still the big players in the Middle East, right?
Yes, but their power was beginning to decline in the 11th century, and that's when another powerful force enters the scene, the Seljuk Turks.
Ah, the Seljuk. I've heard of them. They were a nomadic group, right?
That's right. Originally from Central Asia, the Seljuks migrated into Persia and eventually established a vast empire that encompassed much of the Middle East.
So they were a force to be reckoned with.
They were fierce warriors and skilled administrators. They even captured Baghdad in 1055 CE, effectively becoming the protectors of the Abbasid Caliphate.
So they were kind of like the power behind the throne.
You could say that, but their control over the Abbasid Caliphate eventually weakened as the Seljuk Empire itself began to fragment.
It seems like empires are constantly in flux, rising and falling, expanding and contracting.
It's the nature of power. Nothing lasts forever.
Okay, so we've got all these dynasties, rising and falling empires, expanding and contracting. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, and we're not even close to finishing our whirlwind tour of Islamic dynasties. There's so much more to explore.
Well, I'm hooked. This is like a historical thriller full of twists and turns, powerful figures and empires clashing.
And we're just getting started.
Where are we heading next on this epic journey? What other wonders await us?
Well, in the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into some key concepts and values that shaped Islamic societies and explore how these ideas continue to influence the world today.
Sounds fascinating. I can't wait to learn more.
Stay tuned. So before we jump into the next chapter of our Islamic history saga, I think it's important to step back for a moment.
Okay, yeah, good idea. I mean, we've thrown around all these names and dates, dynasties, empires. It can be a bit overwhelming.
Exactly. And I think what gets lost sometimes is the sheer diversity of the Islamic world.
You're right. It's not just this one big monolithic empire. It's this incredible mix of cultures, languages, interpretations of Islam.
Absolutely. And that diversity is reflected in the art and architecture, the systems of governance, even the intellectual debates that were happening.
Speaking of intellectual debates, one concept that keeps popping up in our sources is jihad.
Yes, a word that often gets misunderstood and misused.
It's a term that carries a lot of baggage, especially in today's world.
And often it's presented in a very simplistic and frankly inaccurate way.
So let's unpack it a bit. What does jihad really mean in the context of Islamic history?
Well, the word itself literally translates to struggle or striving in Arabic.
Okay, so it's not just about warfare then.
Not at all. It can refer to a personal struggle for spiritual growth, for overcoming one's inner demons.
So like an internal battle against temptation, selfishness, anything that pulls you away from God.
Exactly. It's about striving to live a righteous life in accordance with Islamic teachings.
But our sources also mention that jihad can encompass armed struggle, right?
Yes, but it's crucial to understand the context. Armed struggle, or what's sometimes called jihad by the sword, is only permissible in very specific circumstances.
So it's not about waging aggressive wars or forcing conversions.
Absolutely not. Islamic teachings strongly emphasize peace diplomacy and respecting the beliefs of others.
So warfare is seen as a last resort.
Exactly. And even then, there are strict ethical guidelines.
So there are rules of engagement, even in war.
Precisely, there are limits on who can be targeted, how prisoners of war should be treated, what constitutes a just cause for going to war in the first place.
It's interesting because that's actually quite progressive for its time, considering how brutal warfare was in many parts of the world back then.
Islamic teachings on warfare reflect a concern for justice, even in the midst of conflict.
Okay, so we've unpacked jihad a bit. It's a multifaceted concept with both personal and communal dimensions.
It's about striving for righteousness both individually and as a community.
So what other values and principles shaped Islamic societies?
Well, there's another fascinating concept that I think we should discuss, adab.
Adab. I haven't come across that term before.
It's a bit hard to translate directly, but think of it as a code of conduct, a way of embodying Islamic values in every aspect of your life.
Okay, so it's about more than just following rules. It's about cultivating a certain way of being.
Exactly. It encompasses etiquette, good manners, morals refinement, even intellectual curiosity.
So it's like a blueprint for living a virtuous and well-rounded life.
You could say that it's about striving for excellence in character and conduct, about reflecting the beauty and harmony of Islam in your interactions with others.
It sounds like adab is a way of weaving Islamic principles into the fabric of everyday life.
It's about recognizing that Islam is not just a set of beliefs and rituals, but a way of being in the world.
Okay, so we've got jihad as this struggle to live a righteous life and adab as this code of conduct that guides how you do that. What else can you tell us about the values that shaped Islamic societies?
Well, one value that was deeply ingrained in Islamic culture was the pursuit of knowledge.
Right. We've already talked about some of the brilliant scholars and scientists who emerged during the Islamic Golden Age.
It's clear that learning was highly valued in these societies.
And the Quran itself encourages seeking knowledge, right?
Absolutely. The Prophet Muhammad famously said, "Seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim."
Wow. So it's not just encouraged, it's seen as a duty.
Exactly. And this emphasis on learning led to a vibrant intellectual culture across the Islamic world.
And wasn't there something about a famous House of Wisdom in Baghdad?
Ah, yes. The House of Wisdom, a renowned center of learning established during the Abbasid Caliphate.
It sounds like the ultimate think tank.
It was a place where scholars from all over the world came to translate texts, conduct research, and engage in lively debates.
What kind of texts were they translating?
They translated works from Greek, Persian, Indian, even Chinese sources, covering everything from philosophy and medicine to mathematics and astronomy.
So they were preserving ancient knowledge and making it accessible to a wider audience.
And they weren't just preserving knowledge, they were building upon it, making groundbreaking discoveries in their own right.
It's incredible to think that these ideas were flowing across continents, connecting different cultures.
And it's important to remember that the knowledge that was preserved and translated in the House of Wisdom eventually made its way to Europe.
So it had a ripple effect across the world.
It influenced the Renaissance and paved the way for scientific advancements that would shape the modern world.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all connected and that ideas can transcend borders and time.
Exactly. Islamic civilization played a crucial role in facilitating that exchange of knowledge.
Okay, so we've talked about jihad adab, the pursuit of knowledge, and this incredible intellectual legacy. What else should we know about the cultural richness of Islamic history?
Well, we can't forget about the contributions of women, even though they are often overshadowed in traditional historical narratives.
That's an important point. Our sources don't go into great detail about this, but they do mention that women in early Islamic societies had certain rights and protections that were not always afforded to women in other cultures at the time.
That's right. Islam granted women rights to inheritance, property ownership, and education, which were significant advancements for the time.
So while there were certainly limitations and societal norms that shaped women's lives, Islam also provided a framework for their empowerment and agency in certain respects.
It's a complex and nuanced topic that requires careful consideration of historical context and cultural variations.
But it's important to acknowledge the contributions of women throughout Islamic history and to challenge any monolithic or simplistic narratives that might obscure their agency and influence.
Absolutely. We need to recognize the diversity of experiences and perspectives within Islamic history.
Okay, so we've delved into the intellectual, spiritual, and artistic dimensions of Islamic civilization, but we haven't really talked about the nitty-gritty of how these vast empires were actually run.
Yes, the systems of governance that held it all together, the nuts and bolts of empire.
Well, one system that keeps popping up in our sources is the Iqida system.
The Iqida system emerged in the 10th century and became quite widespread in the Islamic world.
So what was it all about? How did it work?
Essentially, it was a way of administering land and collecting taxes. The ruler would grant a piece of land called an iqya to a military commander or official in exchange for their service.
So it's like a reward for loyalty and service.
Exactly. The iketa holder was responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes from the land, and providing military support to the ruler when needed.
Interesting. So it was a way to delegate power and resources while ensuring loyalty to the central authority. But did it work?
It was quite effective for a while, but like any system, it had its drawbacks. Sometimes ika holders became too powerful and independent, posing a challenge to the central government.
Sounds like a delicate balancing act.
It was a constant challenge for rulers to maintain that balance between delegating power and maintaining control.
Okay, so we've got the yukata system. What other innovations were there in Islamic governance?
Well, another development that's worth mentioning is the emergence of the diwan.
Diwan, what is that? Some kind of council?
Essentially, yes. The diwan was a bureaucratic institution that evolved under the Abbasids. Think of it as a government department responsible for specific areas like finance, taxation, correspondence, or the army.
So it was a way to organize and specialize the administration of the empire.
Exactly as the Islamic empires grew larger and more complex, they needed more sophisticated systems of governance to manage their affairs.
Makes sense. You need people to handle the paperwork.
The Diwan system helped streamline the bureaucracy and ensure greater efficiency.
So it was like an early version of a modern government ministry with specialized departments handling different aspects of running the empire.
A remarkable innovation for its time.
So we've got these fascinating systems of governance, but we can't forget that the Islamic world was not static. Empires were constantly expanding, contracting, and interacting with other powers.
It was a dynamic period with a lot of moving parts.
What other major events shaped this period of history?
Well, one event that had a profound impact on the Islamic world was the Mongol invasions of the 13th century.
Ah, yes, the Mongols, I knew they couldn't be far behind. They were like a force of nature. Weren't they conquering vast swaths of territory from Asia to Europe?
They were indeed, and their impact on the Islamic world was devastating in many ways. The Mongol conquest of Baghdad in 1258 CE, under the leadership of Hulagu Khan, marked the end of the Abbasid Caliphate.
Wow, the end of an era. But didn't the Mongols eventually convert to Islam?
Many of them did, in fact. One of Hulagu's descendants, Ghazan Khan, converted to Islam in 1295 CE and made it the official religion of his realm, the Ilkhanate, which covered much of Persia.
So even as they were conquering and destroying, they were also being influenced by the cultures they encountered. That's quite ironic.
It is. The Mongols, despite their reputation for brutality, were also adaptable and often adopted aspects of the cultures they conquered.
So it's not a simple story of good guys and bad guys.
History is rarely that simple. It's full of complexities and contradictions.
And that's what makes it so fascinating. Okay, so the Mongols enter the scene, shake things up, and ultimately become part of the Islamic world themselves. Where does our story go from here?
Well, as the Mongol Ilkhanate began to fragment in the 14th century, new powers emerged in the Middle East, including the Mamluks in Egypt and the Ottoman Turks in Anatolia.
The Mamluks and the Ottomans, two more iconic names from Islamic history.
Both would go on to play major roles on the world stage.
So tell me about them. Who were the Mamluks?
The Mamluks were originally slave soldiers who rose to power in Egypt in the 13th century.
Slave soldiers. That's a pretty remarkable rise to power.
They were known for their military prowess, and they even managed to defeat the Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260 CE, halting their advance into Egypt and North Africa.
So they were a force to be reckoned with. And what about the Ottomans? They eventually became a major empire, right?
They did. The Ottomans started as a small Turkish state in Anatolia in the late 13th century, but they rapidly expanded their power, conquering vast territories in the Balkans, North Africa, and the Middle East.
They were unstoppable.
They even captured Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, in 1453 CE, which marked a major turning point in history.
The fall of Constantinople to the Ottomans, a truly seismic event.
It signaled the end of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a major power in the region.
So we're seeing the emergence of these new Islamic empires, the Mamluks and the Ottomans, who would go on to shape the course of history for centuries to come.
And that brings us to the final part of our journey, where we'll explore the lasting legacy of Islamic civilization.
I can't wait to delve into that. It's clear that the impact of Islamic history extends far beyond the borders of any one empire or time period.
It's a legacy that continues to shape our world in profound ways.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground dynasties, empires, conquests, but now it's time to shift gears a bit.
Yeah, we've been so focused on the political and military side of things that we haven't really talked about the lasting impact of Islamic civilization.
The legacy that goes way beyond borders and timelines. Exactly. So let's dive into that. What are some of the key contributions of Islamic civilization that we still see today?
Well, I think one of the most obvious areas is in the realm of intellectual and scientific advancements.
Right. I mean, we've already mentioned some pretty impressive figures. Ibn Sina, Ibn Khaldun, Ibn Battuta.
These were scholars, thinkers, explorers who pushed the boundaries of knowledge in their respective fields.
And their work wasn't just confined to the Islamic world. Their ideas traveled across continents, influencing European intellectuals during the Renaissance and beyond.
It's amazing to think about how ideas that originated in Baghdad or Cordoba could end up shaping intellectual discourse in Paris or London centuries later.
It's a testament to the power of knowledge and the human desire to learn from one another.
And Islamic civilization played a crucial role in facilitating that exchange of knowledge.
In what way?
Well, for one thing, scholars in the Islamic world translated ancient Greek and Roman texts, preserving classical knowledge and making it accessible to a wider audience.
So they're like the guardians of ancient wisdom, passing it down to future generations.
Exactly, and they weren't just preserving knowledge, they were building upon it, making groundbreaking discoveries in their own right.
Our sources mention the development of algebra, the astrolabe, even early forms of surgery.
They were pioneers in many fields. Algebra revolutionized mathematics, the astrolabe helped sailors navigate the seas, and explorers chart new territories.
It's mind-boggling to think about how these innovations, born out of Islamic civilization, helped shape the course of human exploration and discovery.
The impact is undeniable.
So we've got intellectual contributions, scientific advancements, but the legacy of Islamic civilization extends far beyond those areas, right?
Absolutely. We can't forget about the art and architecture.
Oh, yes, those stunning mosques, palaces, gardens, a feast for the eyes.
It's more than just aesthetics, though. Islamic art is deeply symbolic and meaningful.
In what way?
Well, take the use of geometric patterns, for example. These intricate designs, often found in mosques and palaces, reflect a fascination with mathematics and the order of the universe.
So even the decorative elements have a deeper meaning.
They also symbolize the unity and interconnectedness of all things, a core concept in Islamic thought.
I love that. And what about the calligraphy? I've always been mesmerized by the beauty of Arabic script.
Calligraphy holds a special place in Islamic art. It's a way of elevating the word of God, as revealed in the Quran, to an art form showcasing its beauty and power.
It's like art and spirituality intertwined.
Creating something truly awe-inspiring.
Okay, so we've got intellectual, scientific, artistic contributions. What else is part of this incredible legacy?
Well, let's not forget about the impact of Islamic civilization on language.
Ah, yes, Arabic, the language of the Quran, spread far and wide with the expansion of Islamic empires.
It became the language of scholarship, administration, and trade across vast regions, influencing other languages like Spanish, Portuguese, Persian, Turkish, and many others.
Wow, so even the words we use today carry traces of this historical exchange.
It's a reminder of the interconnectedness of cultures and how ideas and languages travel across time and space.
Speaking of interconnectedness, Islamic civilization also played a vital role in facilitating trade and connecting different parts of the world.
Absolutely. Think about the Silk Road, that legendary network of trade routes that spanned Asia, connecting the East and West.
Islamic merchants were key players in that vast trading network, weren't they?
They transported goods, ideas, and cultural influences across continents, acting as bridges between different civilizations.
So they weren't just traders, they were cultural ambassadors.
Exactly. And this exchange had a profound impact on the development of global trade, shaping economies and fostering cultural connections that continue to resonate today.
It's amazing to think about how all of these threads are woven together, creating this rich and complex tapestry that we call Islamic history.
It's a history that's full of triumphs and tragedies, innovations and adaptations, a story that continues to unfold even today.
And it's a story that we can all learn from and appreciate for its complexity and its beauty.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that despite our differences in culture, language, or religion, we share a common human story.
A story that's interconnected and constantly evolving.
And a story that's definitely worth exploring further.
Well said. This deep dive has been an incredible journey. I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn, more to discover about Islamic history and its impact on the world.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to continue that exploration, to delve deeper into this fascinating subject.
There are countless books, articles, documentaries, museums, and online resources available to help you on your journey.
So keep those minds curious and those hearts open to the wonders of history.
And until next time, keep exploring.